Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Matt Watson. Hi, Matt.
What's going on, man?
Just here. We're going to sit down with one of our local celebrities here in Kansas City and talk about something we haven't talked about before.
Got a Startup Hustle alumni.
Yeah, and also someone who regularly gets paid to speak, unlike us.
No,
we
definitely don't get paid to speak.
Do this for free.
Yeah,
a lot.
Maybe he can show us the way.
I'm hoping. I have been paid to speak before, but not quite as much as today's guest. With us today, we've got Joel Goldberg, who is a Kansas City Royals broadcaster, a public speaker, and a podcast host. Hi, Joel.
I'm back again.
I'm glad you're back.
A repeat customer.
We're trying
That's
to
good.
bring up
Customer.
Customer implies
Offender?
you bought something. That's more like it.
A repeat offender.
I mean, really, for us, it's just an opportunity to be around true professionals and see how this is real, how we're really supposed to run a broadcast media show.
It's really funny because I do feel like I know how to do that, but you've got the equipment for it. So give me your equipment and I'll teach you what I know. Although you guys are doing just fine.
We're just posing. We just bought really nice stuff, and then we look like we know what we're doing. Unlike today, where you walked in my office and I was like, I'm wrangling technology.
Yeah, but like the first 50 episodes of this, we definitely didn't have the nicest equipment.
No,
it's not didn't. Like I love those people that are like, I'm going to start a podcast. Now hold on, let me Google all the shit I need to buy. I'm going to spend like $10,000 on the most expensive shit I can find. Then record my first podcast.
First off, if you really want, and it's not going to sound as good, you can do this with your phone. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously an advanced level, and that's the cool thing about podcasting is, our kids could do it if they want to. Anybody can do it. It's a matter of what you want to put into it. But it's actually an interesting point, Matt, what you made, Watson, that the first 50 episodes, I feel the same way about my first 50 episodes on my podcast too. The first 50 of anything you do are never as good as the next 50. I mean, it's all part of the learning process.
And well, some of that goes with public speaking, which is what we're going to talk about today. Now, I don't think a lot of people know this, but you have built quite a robust public speaking business to go alongside your other stuff.
The other stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Is that because you only work 7 months out of the year?
In some ways, yes. I mean, like when you guys say that well, he's speaking and we're not. Well, that's because you guys are working 12 months a year and I'm working 6 months a year.
I'm trying to figure that out.
Look, the 6 months that I'm working is 7 days a week.
I was going to say, I don't know if I describe it as working as much as being a road warrior for 7 months.
Yeah, it's all of it. Well,
that's the brutal part about
Who's going to win the
road warrior?
Yeah, who's going to win the road warrior title? Mine's a charter that goes 1 to 3 hours. Yours is overseas and all the way over there. But
some of that's by choice.
Some of it's by choice. I understand that, but look, I say that we all work hard. It might come in different ways or different types of hours. I mean, I always said that I'm working a year's schedule in 6 months, so it's just condensed into that 6 months. And then what do you want to do with the other 6 months? And so the speaking business kind of popped up somewhat accidentally, and I've really thrown all of my off seasons and in season too. I'm sitting in a hotel room on the road during the morning and early afternoon before a game, and I'm working on this business, and so I do have the ability to work on this side hustle because I have all that extra time. But it's also something that is it's become a passion of mine, and it's really, like you called it, a robust business. I don't know that it's there yet or not, but it's something that I'm focusing on every day.
Now, all right, I talk to a lot of people who say, they're like, oh yeah, I want to do public speaking. I want to get paid. I want to do this. I want to do that. It's a lot harder than people think it is. I mean, that's first off, finding people to pay you to come give a speech is tough because there's a lot of people that will come do it for free. Mm-hmm. There's that part, and then you got to get in front of the right people. You got to have something to say. You got to we talked about the first 50 episodes of the podcast, or the first 10 or whatever. Like they say with software and startups, if you don't look back at your first release with absolute terror, then you hung on to it too long. But the same thing goes with public speaking. So at what point did you decide to give some of this a shot?
So I'll back up to the beginning, and this did happen by accident. And for as long as I've been in TV, which is now 25 years, but this all came about a few years ago, so 22 years into TV, and I'd been asked to speak at things since I got into it. I mean, I was a 22-year-old broadcaster in a small town in northern Wisconsin, and the local high school is asking me to come out and talk to kids that are 4 years younger than me about how to become a successful broadcaster. Meanwhile, I'm 3 weeks into my career. And then over the course of time, it's the Rotary clubs and the church groups, and, you know, it's occasionally somebody say, hey, we'll give you $500 to come out. So I didn't really even know that this was a thing, that this was a business. It was just somebody wants me to come out, I'll come and talk about baseball and my job, and it's a pretty easy speech to do. I mean,
so you were kicking around in the minors and you didn't even know it.
I didn't know it, and it was just something you do as part of your job. It's outreach to the community. You know, and the speech kind of would go like this. Hey, you know, I'm Joel. Here's where I've been. Here are all my stops. Here's what's going on with the Royals. Any questions? Thanks for coming. And that's 20 minutes and you're done. And I didn't think that that could be a business. And then I was asked 3 years ago to speak to 2 different associations. Well, one was just a group. It was a retreat for a bunch of finance guys in the Lake of the Ozarks from St. Louis and Kansas City. It was an off day in the baseball season. I went. Of course, the game the night before went 14 innings and had to leave the house at 6 in the morning, because that's just when you schedule something that is going to benefit or make you money the next morning, the baseball gods say that's fine, but we're going to keep you a little bit longer.
Are those the games when I intentionally say, "Man, Joel, this game's going really fast," and then it ties up and goes to 16 innings?
Had I known you at that point, I would have heard from you.
Maybe.
It was you're probably thinking of it anyway. But yeah, so when 14 innings, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get home at 1. I got to leave.
You text him and tell him, hey, we need Monty to pitch. Yeah. We're in the 14th inning.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of a thing in the broadcast. It happens a lot. Well, we talked about that on the first podcast you came in and did with us, and thanks for coming back. But you know, that's like a taboo thing to say in the broadcast booth. Like if it's going really fast and you say
never
guaranteed.
Not just broadcast booth, press box, writers, anybody that is involved with this being your everyday. We love it. But never jinx that. It's a weird thing. So I went and did the speech to these finance guys, and it was well received. And I got this adrenaline as I was driving back, like that. You know, I shared a message about winning culture, and wow, this is awesome. And then a few months later, I got asked by a lawn care and golf course management association to speak. I did the same speech, different group. You got finance guys in shirts and ties. You got the lawn care and golf course management folks that are in. You know, a lot of them showing up in belt buckles and cowboy hats, and the message was the same. It was a totally different group, and it was received the same way. And then I had a couple friends of mine locally that said, as people do often in the off season, hey, what are you actually doing in the off season? Not much. I spoke to a couple groups, and they said to me, you know, you could actually start a business. And I said, really? And they looked at me like, what's wrong with you? But what I tell people all the time is, in our world, and we work as hard as anyone else, but we're getting paid to talk about baseball. We're in a little bit of a fantasy land. And for those of us that have never been in business, we've never thought outside of, you know, your season ends and it's, well, what other sport do you want to do? What else can you do? And that's what I was always doing, dabbling in a little this and a little that.
And you do some of that too. You work for the Mavericks.
I do.
Yeah.
And I love that. But that was all I had. And I was traveling around the country doing a random college hockey game here or a small basketball game there. And that's fine. But when you got family and all that, certainly it was fun, but it was time away without a whole lot of reward for it, I guess. And then I start this business. I've never had a business in my life. And now the last 3 years, it's just been building this piece by piece. And what I've kind of learned, along with many other things, and I've invested a lot in it, it's all like anything else, it's all about people. It's all about building relationships and connections and adding value to companies or people's lives. And I didn't know that when I started. I truly started this side hustle as, hey, here's a chance to make a little extra money. It's a chance to make it a little more than an extra money. And then what I realized along the way was I think I'm good at it, but I have a passion for it. I have numerous messages to share, and I'm understanding that I have the ability to get in front of companies, associations, and people and make an impact in their lives, and there's value to that.
Well, speaking of value, you can go to joelgoldbergmedia.com and have Joel come provide value in person. And I should also, before we get to the 40th minute, like we did the other day when we were recording, mention that today's episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by Fullscale.io.
You should better to do that earlier.
This is
you
why.
Can do it again
this
at the
is
40th
why
minute.
we have to have professionals like you come in.
Yeah, I'm not
Because
that
I'm
good.
here wearing, not even wearing a Fullscale
Respect the
shirt for
hustle.
my audio program that I'm performing, and Matt is wearing a parka.
It's cold in here.
Well, that's because we went to the Chiefs game yesterday where it was like 0 degrees.
And Watson's still cold.
Yeah.
So as you are doing the speaking now, are you still speaking primarily about baseball-related things, or have you
Yes.
kind of branched out to do a
Well,
lot of other topics?
Yes and no. And this is one of the challenges for me too. Being a baseball guy, certainly in Kansas City and the region, gets me into a lot of doors, which is great. But then I've got to convince people that I'm not coming and showing up just to talk about what happened in last night's game or what the predictions for next year are. Sometimes that'll come up in Q&A, but I've never in any of these speeches ever broken down baseball strategy. What I have figured out is there are so many lessons in sports, and certainly baseball, because baseball's every day for 6 months, that apply to really any business. Any business, unless you're working for yourself, any business is going to have a team. Every business is going to have roles, defined roles. Every business is going to want a culture.
They're all trying to hit a home run.
And they're all trying to hit a home run, or thank you for that, but or sometimes just the singles. And
I was going to say the singles would probably go a little further in the beginning.
Well, all of it, but so what I've done is I've taken all of these lessons, and I always thought in the back of my head, boy, I've been doing this a long time, and maybe I'll write a book one day, and gosh, I've got all these stories. What am I going to do with them? And then I came to realize that with effective storytelling, and one of the best pieces of advice I got when I started this business from another speaker was, don't tell stories for the sake of telling stories. You know, there are a lot of famous former athletes that can go and just entertain you with stories, and they're going to get paid a lot of money to do that. I'm not that guy, so I have to provide value. And so in telling these stories that I tell, I'm very deliberate and methodical with picking those stories. They all have a purpose. And so I've almost flipped it upside down. This was the advice I got. Figure out what your message is and then tell the stories that back up that message. Yeah. And people can remember those stories. And so when I walk out, and so one of the speeches is championship culture. The second speech is about effective networking. But then the networking speech evolved into effective communication. Then a fourth speech came up, which was, and it's a follow-up to the culture speech, what happens when times are tough? Culture 2.0. How do you maintain that culture when you're going through a losing streak, so to speak? And so, you know, to answer your question, Matt, what I've seen over the last 3 years is, one, there are new stories every day in baseball. And some of them, by the way, are subtle. For instance, I'll give you this example. Hunter Dozier, who had a breakout year for the Royals this year. And I expect when I get in front of an audience that there's a good chance that no one's going to know who Hunter Dozier is. So I have to explain that he's a first-round draft pick. He came about a little bit later. And here he is. He's starting the season, and his numbers are terrible. And he says to me that I'm looking up at the scoreboard, and these big, huge scoreboards in Major League Baseball, those numbers are staring you in the face. Man, I'm only hitting 190 right now. What is wrong with me? And so there's a message here which applies to business of trusting the process, not panicking, not changing the way you're doing things if you believe that you're doing things the right way, not taking shortcuts. So Hunter Dozier, when every game is over, he goes back to his locker and has an Excel sheet that he measures his success by, not just the numbers that are on the board, but you know what, I hit the ball hard. So that might have been an out this time, but eventually that's going to correct itself. I saw this amount of pitches, and he gives himself credit for moments that may not reflect in the traditional stats. And it's a way for him to say, hey, my process is okay, just stick with it, trust it.
Making progress.
I'm making progress. Don't panic. There are so many messages every day in baseball that are relatable. And so that's kind of how I crafted these speeches. And then the cool part about it is there's new stuff that comes up every day. And I started a podcast. And so, each of you have been guests on my podcast. And they're messages that come from successful people in business that are, I did one thing in a speech at one point where I ran a soundbite of a CEO of a big company, and then I ran a soundbite of the manager of the Royals, and they were saying almost the identical thing. It's like, close your eyes, and this could be the manager of the Royals. Close your eyes, this could be the CEO of this company. There are a lot of similarities here.
So And the topic today being paid public speaking, and once again, that's hard.
It is hard.
Matt, have you been paid to actually?
I've never been paid, but the other side of public speaking is using it as a marketing channel, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
It's
different for you guys.
At Stackify, I could use it, and I could go to developer conferences every week and speak and use that just to promote my brand and promote my company to
which
sell
is
my
a form
product.
of getting paid.
Which is different, where you're trying to sell yourself and the message, right? You're not selling a product. You're not out there.
I am the product.
You are the product. You're not trying to get exposure for the Royals or something and sell
That's right.
tickets. You're trying to sell yourself and
what
you're providing.
I will say that there have been moments, still are, where I will do a speech that gets me in front of a room of 100 people that might hire me, and it's less about what the fee is and more about the exposure and showing people what the product is. So that's been interesting too, because I've heard from so many speakers and people in the industry that say, you have to stick to your fees, or I'll just take. Well, the guys that for the most part say, just take whatever I can get, they're also the ones that are getting paid 20, 25 grand a speech to travel around the world, and when they go back home, it's like, sure, I'll take a few grand. Doesn't really matter to me. But for the most part, I try to stick to my fees. But if I can get in front of 100 people that are in HR or 100 meeting planners that are going to go back and say, you know what, I need to tell them about. So there's a little bit of a game with that. But I would view what you're saying, Matt, about it being a marketing tool. That's kind of the way I view my podcast.
Well, and depending on how you're doing the speaking, you doing the speaking is a marketing tool for whoever booked you, potentially, right?
No question.
Where it's like, if you're doing some kind of big conference, you want to be like, oh, when we have so-and-so coming in to speak, and then everybody wants to go to see whoever it is speak, right? Like, that's part of the draw.
There's different ways to approach this, too. So in 2017, I got paid $5,000 to do a keynote. Now, with that, I included 250 copies of my book, Balance Me,
Right.
which this was for the Fraternity Executives of America. And I went to Tampa. I spoke to 500 people, and they used the books as like a value add. But the thing that they really wanted, it was because the content in that book promotes a bunch of different things, is I actually I had a speech. Now, I've given multiple speeches based on that book, but for this particular one, I actually asked them ahead of time. I'm like, what kind of messages are you wanting to reinforce and stuff like that. So I was able to kind of tweak the content. Now, I think one of the things we should talk about is getting the gig. Now, that gig kind of found me. Mm-hmm. My book had come out, and I got a message from someone who'd read it. And, the lady was telling me what was up. And, the thing was, I looked at it, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to go to Tampa, which I had to travel there the day before, I had to be there, and then I couldn't get a flight back that same night because they wanted me to come to some thing. I went out on like a cruise ship with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And then I went back the next day. So I looked at that. That was a 3-day investment of time.
Yeah.
And with that, I was away from my family. I did a lot of different things. And it was 3 days that basically close to 2 days where I couldn't do anything else. So that's.
Were you drinking those drinks with the little umbrellas in it, though?
No, not in Tampa.
No?
No.
Okay.
I was just trying to
Because it didn't sound so rough there for a second.
I mean, it wasn't. There's
value there.
It wasn't rough. I mean, it was interesting, but it was still like, we have busy lives.
It was still work.
Things
still away
going
from
on.
home.
I mean, it was fun and it was interesting. But another thing too is it did require some preparation ahead of time.
Yes.
So
that's the thing people never think about. Like when I've done these
Yes.
speaking sessions back when I worked in automotive, I would do them sometimes, or for Stackify, I would do them. Yeah, I mean, you would spend dozens and dozens and dozens of hours making PowerPoints, planning.
now with that, I had spent some time around that, and I thought about trying to pursue what you're doing, Joel, and then there's like a whole nother marketing.
There's so many layers to it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize that is because how do you get in front of the people that will potentially hire you? So how did you do that?
The very simple foundations, nothing simple, but it begins with networking. And when I say networking, I don't mean necessarily going to a happy hour or an event. Certainly there have been plenty of those. But I mean just making connections. And it's almost what I would call like a family tree. You know, you meet one person, hopefully a really great networker in town, and they introduce you to 5 more, and they introduce you to 5 more. And you don't go into any of those, at least in my case, saying, hey, will you hire me? I've never said that. You just go in there and tell them your story, learn about them, and see where it goes. And you can tell pretty quickly in a conversation, you know, I don't know if this is going to go a whole lot further or not, but if you trust the people in your network, and some you're going to trust more than others, they almost always connect you with good people. And some of those may not lead to anything. Some of them may lead to something in 5 years from now. You don't know. And so I will say that in the last almost 3 years of doing this now, I have met hundreds and hundreds of people. I'll use you two as an example. We may never have met. Maybe we would have. Matt, you reached out to me with the sweet and greet. But I was starting to dabble in the circle a little bit. And so suddenly you introduced me to other people, and I have you guys on the podcast, and on, and it just all kind of works. And one of the things early that I think I struggled with as I was meeting with all these people, and I was trying to just take in as much information as I could. Learn. I mean, I don't have any business background or business degrees, but what I did find was common to the life that I've lived professionally for, almost a quarter of a century now, is it's still, like, people say, oh, you interview baseball players, you're in baseball, you're a broadcaster, how cool is that, blah, blah, blah. I'm in the people business. If I'm not building relationships with those players, and I don't mean building relationships like, hey, let's go hang out. Those guys are half my age. I don't need to hang out with them. Our circles will cross sometimes on the road, and you buy a guy a drink or vice versa. But for the most part, I'm building trust with those guys in relationships, and how can I add value and vice versa. It's the same thing with what I'm doing in the speaking world, and it just starts feeding off each other, and then you get the opportunity, and you got to prove yourself. But I think that answers it. I mean, it all started with building a networking foundation.
No. I would think the best thing is somebody that hears you speak, and then they're like, hey, we need to have him come speak for us for this thing.
It's so much easier for somebody else to sell you than to sell yourself. And
a lot of people probably don't even know you do speaking.
Well, and it's a great point, because hopefully now many more, because DeCourcy tells me all the time about how many people are listening to this podcast. So this is good. Millions.
Right.
It's gone up from the millions now.
Well, one of the things that you should do if you don't do this is maybe, take video of your speaking and release snippets of it. Like every week, it's like, it's a little 1 minute message.
Some places that are going to pay you require that.
Well, that way you're just constantly kind of dripping out there like, hey, I do this thing.
And on top of it, now you mentioned networking as one way to get gigs.
That's the start.
Now, there are marketplaces that basically you can put yourself into that say, hey, this is what I do. This is the topic that I discuss. And they have little tags, including your appearance fee and stuff like that. Now, that doesn't, there's a few of them. And you.
What about your demands? Like, green M&Ms.
Well, that comes
73.5 degrees.
Yes.
On
the problem that I was having with booking more paid gigs was the file size of all my demands was so large. Most people didn't want to wait out the download.
True, yeah.
But no, there was some of these things.
We'll move on to Goldberg. Forget about DeCourcy.
Yeah, you can. He's like, he just wants. He says a couple water's good. But no, some of these marketplaces, I was really surprised at like the kind of people that you could find in there, and then some of them, talking like getting $100,000 plus a speech. And now some people would look at that, and like my wife, when I was talking to her about some of this, she's like, "Who would pay that?" You'd be shocked.
Well, if your name says, Tony Robbins or Colin Powell or George Bush,
these big corporate events where they bring in a 1,000 of their top managers for a Fortune 500 company, and they want. Now here's the thing: is like if they paid $25,000 for a keynote, that's $250 a person. Well, it's not a huge investment if those people leave with something valuable that comes from it. But you also have to show up to that ready to go.
It's like the Kansas City Developer Conference. If they got Linus Torvalds to show up, who's the inventor of Linux, to speak, like you'd have lots of people that would line up.
The investor of Linux is named
Inventor.
Linus.
Yeah.
And that's
pretty cool.
And people would kill each other to show up and listen to him,
sure.
right? So
we could have probably also invited like Travis Wright to come in here, and he's someone who like Travis is in the business of being Travis in a lot of ways, and because of his podcast Bad Crypto, he's become a very well-known person.
People pay him to speak.
Yeah, and do different appearances and stuff like that at conventions and stuff that are related to it. And I mean, there's but the thing is like you got to get out there, and that's the thing. You got to the personal networking and then some other stuff. Now, did we ever publish the website that we built you? Has that happened yet, or will it soon? Someday?
It might, as we're talking right now. I was told that it might be going live today.
There you go.
So yeah, I mean, I had a starter website, and now Full Scale is taking it to a much higher level than starter. I mean, it's like anything else when you begin something, and you guys both have started companies, and what it is today isn't what it was when you started, and that's okay, right? I mean, I think that we all sometimes tend to look at the end result or where we want to be and forget about the whole journey along the way. And so, what I know today versus what I knew 3 years ago is worlds ahead, and I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. And
some of that was the presentation, and that was just me saying, hey man, like, how about we use a little bit of our spare time? Let's tune up your site for you and a few things. But that online presence is important because people want to see that you're serious about being in whatever business that you're saying you're in.
Well, these are all of the challenges, and I know everyone listening can relate to this. These are all of the challenges of an entrepreneur. I never knew that I was an entrepreneur. I guess I never was, but there's something to do every single day, and you've got to figure out what it is. The website's got to be better. The marketing's got to be better. Matt Watson, you mentioned video snippets. We need to do more video. We need to keep working on the branding. We need to be able to keep networking. We need to be able to on and on and on, right? I mean, it's all of that, and so you do have to figure out and pick what you want to work on.
I refer to it as building capabilities, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you have to figure out, okay, we get good at this, and now it's like, now we have that capability. Now we can go build another capability, right? It's like with our podcast, we didn't used to do video. We didn't used to have a wonderful Breland in here taking photos now, and we didn't have TikTok, and we didn't have Startup Hustle
or Lego Voltron.
We didn't we build these capabilities.
I do not have Lego Voltron.
No one's letting them talk.
Eventually you get good at these things and you can add an additional piece, right? But you can't do all of them the first day. It's just too much.
Or the first week or the first month. I mean, it's a process. And so.
And the same with business. Like any kind of business, you can't do all of these things at one time.
So the one thing that you can keep doing every single day, depending on your type of business, is you can keep connecting with people and keep networking. And I think that where that evolves to over the years, or has for me, is meeting the right people. And when you're starting out, you're kind of doing it a little bit blindly, and then you start sort of figuring out, who you need to meet and the right people. And again, who you need to meet doesn't mean who's going to hire me. It just, where can I provide value? Where can I learn? Where can I make some effective connections? And it just starts all adding pieces to the puzzle.
The thing about networking is you meet with people and you don't think necessarily that you can help them or sell them something or they'll be a customer or whatever, but they might know somebody who will, right? Like somebody listens to you speak, and 3 weeks later they're having a drinks with somebody else who's trying to figure out who do we book to come do our corporate meeting.
And you don't know who that is.
And you don't know who it
army
is.
of evangelists, baby.
Yeah, you have no idea.
Build up your army of evangelists.
And they're like, Goldberg, you should have him do it. Oh, okay.
It's, by the way, that's hard to do.
It is hard.
Especially and Joel, I've been with you in places go meet Joel at anywhere for lunch, and 19 people are like, hey, it's Joel Goldberg.
And then, of course, he's like, he's not that big a deal. I'm like, of course, he's right. Welcome to the family. You sound like my family. So.
But it's the thing is that's tough, because no matter where you go, you have to be on point. Because if you're having a shitty day, and you let that person know it, they remember that.
No question.
And it's tough.
Well,
it's tough.
That's my attitude when I go to the grocery store. I mean, you got to keep your head up, because, somebody recognizes you, and all they want to do is talk Royals people aren't going to stop you to talk Royals for 20 minutes for the most part. They just want to say, hey, how about that new hire? Hey, how about that new move? Hey, what are we going to do this offseason? Hey, love you, whatever. And that 30 seconds goes a long way. I mean, it does. You never know who's looking, who's watching. Somebody always is, though.
But those people, while they might, like you said, Matt, they work somewhere. One of them is on a committee somewhere that decides who the speaker is going to be at the company retreat or whatever, and you're like, I met Joel Goldberg, and he seemed really nice. Let's go to joelgoldbergmedia.com and get a hold of Joel.
And that's.
Do you like what I did there?
So when you walk around the grocery store, you're like, yeah, the Royals are gonna be great next year. And by the way, I do speaking. Here's my card.
Yeah. No, but you know, I do.
Some of that wouldn't hurt.
No, but I do.
Because you're Joel Goldberg, and people know you here in Kansas City. But if I want to start my speaking business, people might not know that about me.
Well, that helped me get in the door. What I say all the time is that I was lucky enough, because of the exposure that I've had in baseball, I was lucky enough to not have to start on the ground level. You know, maybe I was starting on the 5th floor because enough people watch. But my whole thing is that just because I'm starting on the 5th floor doesn't mean I'm not going to still focus on the foundation, which, back to what I said, was the networking. It's still all about relationships. It's all about people. It's all about building trust. You guys have both been incredibly successful in what you do, together and individually. And I know that it's not just that you guys are smart and you've figured some amazing things out and you're providing value for your clients all around the world, but you continue to build relationships and connections. So that's common. That's a common thread no matter what we do. I mean, take a look at it from a baseball standpoint for a moment. Mike Matheny's hired as the new manager of the Royals. The first day that he was hired, from what I was told, he had reached out and was able to get on the phone with 39 of the 40 players that were on the 40-man roster. That's starting to build the relationships from day one. He's not going to show up at spring training in the middle of February when you got 6 weeks to start getting ready for a season, first introducing himself to people. So there is a networking and a relationship building and a trust factor in what we all do. One of the things that I've tried to do with that is then take those lessons through stories, doesn't matter if you're a baseball fan or not, and pass those on. I'm not telling anybody anything that they've never heard before. I'm doing it through a different lens.
So let's talk about. So you've gained credibility through being a member of the Royals broadcast team. You're like a member of the Kansas City Royals family. A lot of people know you because you're constantly getting Gatorade buckets dumped on you, which is probably fun and annoying at the same time.
Yeah, that's fair.
And at the same time, now if you're
I'd like to see one dumped on Watson right now.
Yeah,
we can make that happen.
I'm just saying, like, it looks like he's up at Lambeau Field right now, all bundled up, and that would be. I move quicker, by the way. The colder it is, the quicker I move.
And by the way, if you want to see Matt Watson bundled up, you can go to the Startup Hustle YouTube channel and check it out. Now, with this, you talk about building credibility. Now, I've spent the last 3 years of my life as I went from wanting to be unknown to needing to be known, because I reinvented myself, basically. I had the previous business that I owned and was a part of. I didn't really care. I didn't care if I was networked. I didn't need to be. And I started moving to change my online presence, and this takes time too. Now, here's the thing, is if someone's going to pay you to be a public speaker, they're going to Google you. It depends on how much they've heard about you. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But if you don't have a strong everything, when someone Googles you, and there's things you can do. Like you can, all right, first off, I wrote a couple books. That was a good start. I mean, a big start. And that's been a platform that I've leaned on. The podcast has helped with a lot of this stuff. But also there are things that you need to, if you want to be a public speaker, you need to get your game together on. You need to have a YouTube channel that preferably has you speaking to people on it. You need to make sure that, if you aren't going to keep up with like stuff like Twitter, close it. And then also do things like become a verified person on Google. Matt has a Wikipedia page.
I do.
Yeah, and just different things like that. People go and these things start to add up, and it's like, if I put Matt DeCourcy in Google, then I get the little sidebar. It shows my books. It shows a few other things, and then I know people that are actually well known, and they do that, and they're like, yeah, look at this. Joel from Humphreys McGee is like that. He's got like a whole entire sidebar. It's got like albums, books, like all this different stuff. But when you bring it up, these things make an impression, and that stuff does matter. And you talk about things not happening overnight. That's part of it.
This is all what I said before, pieces to the puzzle. Some pieces are bigger, some pieces are smaller. It's a long game.
Yep.
It's a long game, and I think that anyone that starts, certainly in a speaking business, that's expecting it's almost like what I would tell a young broadcaster, that they all want to come and start as the sideline reporter in the NFL or my job or whatever it is. And if you look at and every now and then that happens, very rarely though. If you look at my TV career, I went from television news in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, town of 7,800 people, making $13,500 a year in 1994. I had to move out of the $300 a month rent apartment because it was too expensive for me. So, and by the way, moved in to share a 2-bedroom with our director who looked like Garth from Wayne's World. That was 1995.
So wait, Joel, you weren't immediately successful as a broadcaster and a public figure? That just didn't happen instantly? I'm shocked.
Here were my responsibilities at that TV station. Actually, I started in news, then moved into sports, but even when I started in news, there wasn't a sports opening. So I'd work my day shift doing news, and then I'd offer to the sports department to go shoot some high school game, and I'd work another 3 or 4 hours doing sports because what else was I going to do? And it at least helped me get into there. I was an anchor, I was a reporter, I was a writer, I was a producer, I was an editor, I was a cameraman. I did all those things. And so go from there to Madison, Wisconsin to St. Louis to regional sports to here. And I feel like I found my ultimate ideal job that I dreamed of after 15 years in the business, 12, 13 years in the business. So that didn't happen overnight. There are a lot of similarities to it. And much of that, again, was built on, it's not just who you know, it's earning their trust. It's, okay, great, I know Matt Watson. Okay, great, I know Matt DeCourcy. That's good, but if I don't...
That ain't going to get you in any doors.
I might, but...
Maybe like 3.
But you have to earn that respect, and you certainly have to show who you are as a person and what your abilities are. It goes back, Matt Watson, to what you were saying too. I mean, and DeCourcy, what you were saying about the army of evangelists. Once you're in that door, you still have to prove yourself, and then those people will go and spread that message. But if you're not good and you're not treating people the right way, it's going to stop right there.
So since we're on the topic of getting paid speaking gigs, I think we should talk a little bit about like negotiating a fee, or if you want one. And like Matt, you had a very good point earlier. Like you consider, I think it starts with considering what am I trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. For me, it's also about geography. Like I'll probably come speak to your group in Kansas City for free because I can drive up the street and do it and go home like when I'm done. And that now if I have to travel, then it's gonna be expensive.
But
just because it's just a trade-off for the time. Now, Matt, I've seen you speak, and we've actually done different stuff. Like I moderated a panel at the Fund Conference that we were at. I've seen you speak when you won the Masters Award. I don't know. We get asked to do stuff locally, and
you're always going to get asked.
Locally, I haven't ever asked for an appearance fee. Now, if I have to travel to Tampa or something like that, sure. Now, what are some of the things that you consider, and I don't want to discuss your fee.
Sure.
But what are some of the things that you consider that a listener right now might not think about? I think obviously travel is one, the subject matter. Do I have to prepare something all new? Because if I do, that's a whole nother ballgame. Or can I repurpose something that I'm already I don't have to write a speech about entrepreneurship. And you don't have to write one about being a software developer. No. Or different stuff like that. So what are your criteria? What are you examining?
So there's a few things. And one, let's start with the beginning where when you're just starting, you're going to end up having to do events for free or for a very small fee to prove yourself.
Meaning like $100, like gas money and lunch.
Yes. Yeah. And everyone will be willing to pay for that. But there's only one way to prove yourself. And again, if you are George Brett, if you're Michael Jordan, if you're whatever it is, they'll just pay you to show up for your name.
Yeah, sure.
And everybody will show up at that conference because they want to take a picture or whatever it is and be entertained by stories. Most of us don't have that luxury, me included. So you do have to start smaller. Now let's say you start to build that up. And what I found, and I will tell you right now, every bit of this business that I've done, a lot of which I didn't know a whole lot about, and I, along the way, have hired a marketing manager, and she does a lot of my stuff, which is amazing, and she knows the algorithms and all that. Okay, I know what I know what I don't know, but the one thing that made me the most uncomfortable was negotiating. I'd never done that before, and now you're not only are you negotiating for yourself, but you're negotiating the product, which is you. And that made me uncomfortable. I would have conversations with companies and people, and I'd go 30 minutes in this conversation and then put off the whole fee thing and hope that it would just happen on its own.
Yeah, but here's the issue is if you wait to do that, like in that 30 minutes up to that, you better be doing nothing other than building the value.
That's right.
Like when you give a sales presentation, typically the last page should have the price, because the stuff you're talking about prior to that is about building that value that goes with it. So like, for example, you'd say, well, I'll come to you. We have an audio visual presentation. You get 200 copies of my book for whatever. I will stick around and sign those books with your guests. We can do photographs or something like that. But you have to put some fences and boundaries around this stuff too. Otherwise, you might spend a whole day there.
That's right.
And that might be fine. Like in Tampa, I was cool with that because I was already there. And I don't know anyone else in Tampa except for Kenny Powers.
Yeah, you need a book to sell.
Right. Well, we're working on that. And we are working on that.
T-shirts. Coffee mugs.
Yeah, it all can happen. But see, what
you
happens?
need some merch.
Bobbleheads.
Right. What happens with the book?
Baseball bats.
All of it. What happens with the book is not only is it exposure and branding, but now suddenly, hey, we don't really have that in our budget to pay your full fees. However, we have a separate marketing budget, and we can purchase X amount of books.
That's what they did in Tampa.
Make it back. Right now, you make it back. But
and by the way, that was like a 3-day negotiation for me. So it doesn't always just happen right away. They were like, what do you need to come down there? I'm like, if I need to come down there, it's $5,000. And she's like, I don't know if we have the budget for that. And then I thought about it, and the next day I said, hey, how about I throw in copies of the book? And I thought this was super clever. She found a sponsor for the books that paid $20 a book, which was the retail price on it. And there are little weird tangible, hold them in your hand kind of items like that brought some value. And then she ended up being way under budget because someone else paid for the books, and then she didn't have to hire a keynote speaker. Good work.
You're a hero now to her.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: a lot of the people that you're dealing with, they've got a budget, and if they've got to go over that budget, they've got to go answer to somebody.
Yep.
And that's the type of stuff you lose sleep over, because you got to come back to the office the next day and talk to your superior about why you need more money, and that's not a conversation you want to have. So,
well, unless the person speaking is selling tickets at the door that drive a larger gate revenue, which in most of the cases, I mean, are you ever speaking at things where people pay money to get in?
Not a whole lot yet.
I mean, kind of rare, right?
I mean, companies might be paying to go to a certain event, but whoever you're talking to on the phone has other things to do. They don't want to be tied up with trying to justify why they're overspending on you when you can do them a favor. And that doesn't mean do them a favor, I'll cut you a deal, okay, I'll do it less. One of the biggest challenges is saying no, not just to a gig, but to everything. I mean, one of the things for me in doing this now, and as my name has been able to get out there a little bit more in terms of being a speaker, is you have every charity, every event that, hey, we're a nonprofit, and they're all great causes, but you can't say yes to every single one of them. It's hard to say no to a good cause, and so you have to start picking what really matters most to you, what touches your heart. And then in terms of the fees, because I really believe that you can't be all over the place. I mean, I had this happen once. Well, hey, we heard that you'll go down in fees because I cut it for somebody else, right? So you really do have to be defined in, look, I can cut you a 10% discount here because it's down the street, because it's local, or whatever it is. We signed a package deal and you want 3 speeches for your employees and clients, and so we'll work out a deal. But for the most part, you can't just be all over the place. But one thing that I have learned, which is very interesting to me, is not everything has to have value in terms of dollars, in terms of money. So you talked about the books, but what if you guys were talking about video snippets and all of that? Hey, we can't afford this amount. We can only afford this. Ooh, we're a couple grand off. Hey, do you guys have a photographer? Yeah. Okay, if they could shoot those pictures and give them to me, that would count for $500 worth of whatever, instead of me hiring somebody. You guys have a videographer? Yes. Okay. Hey, could you make 3 recommendations or introductions to people in similar associations in different states, if you like what you see? And suddenly you can build that value back and say, you know what, I've been able to close the gap. So instead of just saying, well, some money's better than no money, you do have to have some fee integrity there. I think unless you're just trying to make money and I'll take whatever I can get. But if you're trying to run a successful business, there has to be a set value to it.
But do you vary your your fee based on how big the audience is, or if it's a nonprofit or a corporate retreat, or I mean, so is your fee a little different for those types of scenarios?
Certainly for a nonprofit. I mean, if it's something that they have a budget for, and a lot of them do. So the ones that don't have a budget or are looking for free, that's where I'm going to say I'm going to pick an X amount per year, and it's going to be causes that are really important to me. And if somebody else wants me and I'm not available, or and I've done too many of them already, I'll pass you on to somebody else. That's value that you can provide too. Like, look, this isn't going to work for me, but let me see if I can connect you with somebody else, and that makes them feel good.
Then DeCourcy steps in.
And then DeCourcy steps in, right? But in terms of a not,
well, you need a closer.
You need a closer, Monty.
Monty.
But to what you're saying, a lot of times that nonprofit will have a budget, and to me, okay, I'll give a discount just because they are a charity.
Yeah.
So you do it that way. In terms of, it's tough to sit there and say I'll charge X amount for this amount of people, because now you have to start counting.
Yeah, that's not as common. Most people, the fee's the fee, and they might get, like you said, give a discount for the region.
That's right.
And then also like the nature of.
But there are also bigger events. For me, a lot of what I've been hired to do is coming into a company that's having a monthly meeting, or they'll create an event because they want their employees. They've heard that this message will resonate with their employees, or they saw it somewhere else. I spoke at so-and-so group at a breakfast, and a vice president of a bank went back and said, we've got to hire him. Let's create an event for our employees, and let's do 2 more for clients, which is also value they can provide their clients. That's going to be different structure than, say, some big annual meeting with a huge budget where they've got meeting planners and that type of thing. So not everything is created equal, but I think you try to put things in different buckets, if that makes sense.
I've got a couple other tips. One is, if you're trying to become a paid public speaker, you need to write all your stuff out. You need to make a one-pager about yourself.
Yes.
And make it look pretty.
You're selling yourself.
Yeah. I mean, this is a bio. This is got your headshot on it. So pick your best glamour shot from 8th grade and put it on there. But you got to have all the info about you, because here's the thing is, once you get the inquiry to do these kind of things, you got to be able to send that right over. And then also have your agreement ready. Have something ready, and be there and have it ready to deliver, and here you go. Someone inquires.
Gotta make it easy for people to buy.
Yes.
Well, and I've got a folder full of stuff. Here's my summary on this speech. Here's my one-pager. Here's a contract. Here's a W-9. Here's you got everything ready.
You can put it all in a Google Drive folder as well.
That's right.
And have your little data center that has different stuff. It could be, and some of that too should be there to help whoever you're speaking to promote you.
Here.
And different things that they can use, things that they can use to make. They shouldn't have to come back and be like, "Hey, can we get a picture of your head?" That should be in there.
That's right. In my whole folder of stuff that they might want, there's a bio, there's an intro, there's a headshot, there's the contract, there's a W-9, there's a summary. And some of these associations, they need that summary because they've got to sell it for continued education for whatever field they're in, and so they've got to be able to justify the fees that they're paying, and they've got to be able to fulfill certain requirements. So you learn all of that as you go, and then the other thing that I would say too is, Matt, you were talking about going out and it's easy to do a speech on software development, so you've got that speech. All right, I've got my championship culture speech, which will change with new stories that come up, and who do I like this story better than this story? The framework is always there, but now I've got some company, and this is I think where you can maybe put yourself ahead of some other starters, some other speakers that are trying to find their way. How can I personalize it to your company? Yep. How can I, especially for a specific company?
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot of research. It's getting on the phone with that person and just asking some questions. What
do you want to focus on?
Yeah.
Is there a message I can help resonate?
Are there any struggles you guys are having right now? What do you want to accomplish? And then one of the things that I'll do too, you can do it by phone, local, even better to go meet with them, is, hey, I'm going to talk about these topics. For instance, in my championship culture speech, I talk a lot about trust. I've mentioned that word a bunch in here already. I talk about the importance of energetic people, not the loudest people, the positive people. I talk about accountability. I talk about the importance of giving to those around you, to passing on what you know. And I'll start asking the organizer, hey, who's that person here in this company? Because if I can now reference, you guys have someone like that right here. Now suddenly you're dotting the I's, you're crossing the T's, and you're making it more personal. You're making it not just about my stories, but you're making it about them. That's true for what all of us do, right? I mean, it's not about us, it's about your clients, it's about their needs. So when you can personalize that and connect those dots, it really goes a long ways.
For the speech I did in Tampa, I sent them an outline, and I asked, I said, are there any things in here that you consider to be key points? Now, for that particular event, they wanted so I've got a whole section about the lack of productivity we create in our own lives, from like looking at our phones, social media, like low value activities, playing video games, doing stuff like that. And they really wanted me to highlight that, because the people that were there were in charge of fraternal organizations with younger people in it, and they wanted that message to resound. So as we as we close out yet another episode of Startup Hustle, which is brought to you by Fullscale.io and Joel Goldberg Media today.
Am I a sponsor?
You no, because then I have to
We'll
pay
bill
you.
We'll
bill you.
Oh,
We'll bill. Yeah.
I don't want to be a sponsor.
I thought you meant, are you sponsored? Because the answer to that is also no.
Okay.
But, I think one of the things, too, is when you do actually go out and do some of these events, use the power of the people. Do you ask people to post a picture of you when you, like, from your speech? Like, I did that, and this was 2 or 3 years ago, and that was before everyone posted everything. It's when people were just beginning to post everything. But I had a bunch of tweets and different stuff like that. And
LinkedIn is big.
Yeah, nothing will help promote your message that you're a speaker more than people actually posting pictures.
Yeah, and that's a simple ask at the end of the, because I'll always throw up, hey, if you want to get a hold of me, or if I can help you in any way, certainly if it's for an association, please feel free to let me know what I can do. And that is a simple ask too. At the beginning and or the end, hey, take a pic and tweet it out, let everybody know, if you liked it or not, that type of thing.
And don't leave it up to people to determine what to say. Like, and I know that sounds crazy, but be like, hey, if you want to take pictures during my presentation, feel free to do it, and make sure you hashtag DeCourcy is awesome. Or something like that, but if you can get that standard message, it's
and
like
extremely handsome too.
And with a thick, full head of hair, man. Hashtag DeCourcy looks younger than he is.
So I have a question.
Nobody's ever said that about me.
Question for you as
Yes.
we round this out. So, what is your goal for how? Obviously, you have 6 or 7 months a year. You have your other job. How many speaking sessions are you trying to do?
I don't.
For those that are listening and trying to think about, how do I make money doing this? Am I speaking once a week? Is it once a month? Like, how much money can I make?
The cool thing about, and I don't have an answer for you completely, but the nice thing about this is, to me, there's no ceiling to it. It can go as far as, you want it to go if you're willing to put in that effort and time. I mean, a lot of what we do, this is how far you can go. This thing can go anywhere. I mean, most of my focus to this point has been on Kansas City and a little bit beyond in this region, because I feel like I can get into some doors, because there are a lot of Royals fans out there. Now I have to prove myself once I get in there. But one of my goals is to start taking, when we talk about 6 to 7 months a year, I am working on this business year round. The one thing I will say is that there's a lot more room for growth in this business than where I'm at in TV. I've probably reached close to my peak in TV, and I'm good. I'm happy where I'm at there. I love, 12 seasons of doing Royals baseball. I will not allow this speaking business, as long as I'm doing the TV, to keep me from doing my TV job. I might have a speaking opportunity that could be much more lucrative than one day of baseball, and I'm not going to skip the baseball.
Yeah.
That is, and I say this to people all the time, as long as the side hustle's the side hustle, it has to be the side hustle, even if it can be more lucrative at a certain point. The main hustle is there still. So that's the one thing to me. But one of the things that I would like to do in terms of growing this, in terms of how many to do and all of that, is I want to get to a point where I could show up and we're in Cleveland or we're in Chicago, we're in Minneapolis, and maybe I have an opportunity to go speak to a company at lunchtime before going to a game that night. Because I'm already there. You don't have to pay for the travel.
Yep.
That's going to take some time. I did one this year in Atlanta for J.E. Dunn. Now, there was a great connection with J.E. Dunn based here in Kansas City. And so I end up going there and doing a lunchtime event at the J.E. Dunn Atlanta office, one of their biggest in the country. That makes a lot of sense to me. So that's certainly one of the next steps. But I don't have a number. I would love to be speaking 3, 4, 5 days a week, 3 days, 4 days a week in the off season because I can.
Then it wouldn't be your side hustle anymore, right? Then it would be your full-time hustle.
Well, but yes and no, because he's still got to go back to baseball.
Well, somebody said to me recently, they asked the question, they said, if you had to pick one or the other, what would it be? And I never in my wildest dreams thought that would even be a question I would entertain, because of course it's the baseball, right? I mean, that's what I've done forever. It's my dream. It's what I've dreamed of doing since I was 10 years old. But I'll be honest, I'm at a point right now where I don't want to have to pick one over the other. And I don't have to. That's the good news.
I think picking one over the other might kill the other, though. I mean, and that's one of the things. It's like, if you think about it,
they do play off each other.
I mean, and
that's a luxury. That's something that I have that others don't have.
Right.
You will never hear me go on television and promote Joel Goldberg Media or the speaking business. I'm not going to say a word about that. They're separate, but yet they intersect all the time.
Right. If you'd like to have me on the broadcast, I'd be happy to talk about you as a public speaker during the game.
While wearing a full-scale hat.
Yeah, but I'll be on radio or TV?
Well, you do have a face for TV, man.
Yeah,
with that
for
full
TV.
Head, with that full head of hair.
For TV or for radio?
Well, I was trying to be nice and say
I
TV.
appreciate that.
I was going the opposite way.
But you talk about the things that keep you out there, and that's what's important. I was thinking in regards to, like speaking, it would be like Matt and I decided we didn't want to run Full Scale, or he didn't want to run Stackify or any of that, because we wanted to just go be speakers. Now, Matt probably could do that. He sold a company for an insane amount of money. I could probably do that, but I would be leaning on different criteria. But some of that, I mean, and I think you get to a certain point where you could look at it. But the same thing when I gave a presentation at Global Entrepreneurship Week about podcasting. The very first question I asked is, who here wants to start a podcast and have that be how they make a living? And about a third of the people raised their hand, and I said, look, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm going to get this out of the way. It's probably not going to happen. And I mean that because there's a zillion people that'll do it. And the same reason that you see a lot of media jobs that, you mentioned where was it in Rhinelander? Mm-hmm. Okay, the thing is there's a lot of Rhinelander Wisconsins, and there's a lot of people like Bob Fesco was in here talking about driving 2.5 hours to broadcast a football game and then come back and then for a $10 paycheck minus taxes.
That's right. And the people that are willing to do that will be the ones that, if they stick with it, will end up getting ahead.
But if you're not willing to go through that, just make a stop at that station, your train is not going to continue to roll on.
And that applies to all of us. I mean, you guys talk. It's in the intro to Matt Watson's success. Well, that didn't happen on day one.
Nope.
And I bet
it didn't.
Nope.
So many people forget that part.
Well, it's the same thing even with this podcast. I mean, this is
same as your journey though too.
Be in the ballpark at 250 episodes when this comes out, and you know what? We managed to get a little bit of traction in the first couple months, and then it took work. We even let this thing die at one point and revived it. And with that, I mean, that's the thing, is building an audience. It's very rare. I've only been around a couple people in all of life that actually did that kind of stuff quickly. So
here's the last thing.
Hang on. I'm going to let you do this because we have a new thing, because you haven't been back for this. We now do the Founders Freestyle to end. So you actually get your own, you can freestyle. You can do whatever you want, Joel.
Which is something my producers always tell me, please don't do, because it goes too long.
You can have as much time as you want.
No, I won't go that long.
We suggest rapping.
I just
or
think
singing.
When you're starting a side hustle, whether it's a speaking business or whatever it is, one, I mentioned it, the main hustle still has to be a priority, because that's what's putting food on the table. And the second that you walk away from that, you better make sure that side hustle can be a main hustle. But the second thing I would say to that is, it has to be something that you're passionate about. If you are looking at it as a way to just make some extra money, that's fine. We all have been in situations or are in situations where we need to find a little bit of extra money to buy those Christmas presents for the kids, or for, some event that comes up, or something that wasn't planned for. I get that. But long term, if you want this side hustle to be successful, something more than just that's going to, bail you out of a tough situation, it has to be something that, one, you're good at, and two, that you have a passion for. And I will say, with complete honesty here right now, that when I started this, I was told it could be a way to make money, and I thought, okay, I might be good at this. Sure, I'd love a source to make some extra money. And what I found out over time as I've grown this business, and it's become much more than I ever expected, is that I love doing it. And I'm putting in more time and hours in my off season to something than I've ever done before. I'm working more than I've ever worked before, but I love it. It's fun. And when I get feedback from audiences saying, hey, you changed my mindset. I got an email from a lady after speaking at a conference. I'll wrap it up with this. I got an email. It was an HR conference, and she went there. She emailed me after, and she said, I will be honest with you right now and tell you that I came here today or yesterday or whenever she sent me the email with one goal. I'm not happy with my job, and I came there hoping to find a new job, and I didn't. But you know what? You gave me the tools and the motivation to go back to my job and understand that I have a role to play. I'm going to play that role. I understand that I have a purpose, and until I move on somewhere else, I'm going to do this with a better attitude, and I want to thank you for that. And that was all I needed to hear to think, wow, I think I just helped somebody. And so that's become a passion of mine, to be able to take, a lifetime's worth of baseball and sports and turn that around and repurpose it into something that can help make people's lives better.
Speaking of great attitudes, do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Watson?
Yeah, I was going to say speaking in general is a really powerful thing that a founder or CEO needs to be good at, and depending on the type of business and industry you're in can be really beneficial to the company. What you're doing, Joel, is kind of your own business, but think about it from like Stackify. It's a marketing channel for us, or the lady we had on that did hair art. She is the industry expert at that, and she can go to conferences and events. Everybody wants to see her talk. They want to see her speak because she's the expert at it. And they may even pay her, but if they don't pay her, she's able to sell, and promote her product, right? And so doing speaking and this kind of stuff is its own marketing channel. Even if you're not getting paid for it, you can use it to sell and represent your company, promote your company, sell your book, whatever it is, right?
No better representative of Stackify than the CEO of Stackify.
Hope so.
So if you're comfortable as a speaker, or you become comfortable as a speaker, that becomes extremely effective. If you don't, fine, but if you do, look at how much further that potentially takes the company.
It's a branding opportunity.
Yes.
By the way, being third or fourth every episode for the Founders Freestyle is kind of like batting cleanup, because
you're the closer again.
You let everyone get on base, and then pretty much a single will drive in runs, a home run makes you look like a hero. But
don't try to swing for the fences. A single often turns into that grand slam.
No, I always swing for the fences.
I know you do.
And I strike out a lot because of it, but
okay.
Oh well. Now, I think you guys both said it really well. You got to be passionate. If you're not passionate about what you're speaking about, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
People are going to figure that out. And then I think the main thing is even though the topic was starting a speaking business, the part of starting a speaking business is to get your message out there. Like Matt said, it's not always about getting paid an appearance fee. It's about what kind of positive exposure. And then, every time I speak to people or do anything like that, even including recording this podcast, I learned something.
That's right.
Like, you learn some really interesting stuff about yourself and your own business talking about it. And I think that as well as if anything, there are so many intangibles that you can't track a return on your effort. You talk about changing people's lives. And I enjoy that with the podcast, because there's someone out there somewhere in the 190 countries that have listened to this that didn't do something that was going to really not go well. Mm-hmm. Because they heard something or someone on this podcast talk about it, and then they thought about it. And you can't judge. That is technically changing someone's life, and you can't measure or really gauge a return on that. You just need to kind of get out there and do it. And I think, and then the final thing when it comes to speaking, I think it's fun.
It is.
I think it's fun to share your story and tell people about what you're doing. And it's funny because I've talked to rock stars before, and I said, when did you know that you were onto something? And they'd say, when we could tell people we're finally paying attention. Because think about it, you're playing at like a shitty bar and everyone's like trying to pick up chicks and no one's paying attention to the band, and then one day they are. And it's the same way with your speaking. Like work on it. It's like anything else. You have to practice it, get smooth with it. Joel mentioned earlier, like refining the approach, and you know, like I've talked to people that have done this for a career, and they can shape that speech into any amount of time. By the way, the speech that I got paid to do was supposed to be an hour, and they were running way behind, and I had to trim it down to 40 minutes, which is a tough, like, last-minute ask.
It is.
When you're trying to be in a specific spot.
Until you do it over and over again, and then you've been in that situation, and you say, oh, I've been there before, I can do that.
Yep, and then you have a response. You got to be prepared. There's a lot to it, but you know, you just got to get out there and do it. Once again, go to joelgoldbergmedia.com. You can reach out to Joel. You can book him to come speak for anything, about anything.
Yeah, I mean,
Joel's also an expert on hair art.
I'm not going to come out there and teach you how to develop software.
Sure you are.
I'm not going to come out there and teach you how to dye your hair, because I haven't figured that out yet either.
Well,
that's always fun, by the way. Over the years, they used to have me do these. What was it? The not Hair Club for Men, but Just for Men or whatever it was. That was just a part of the contract they had on TV, and I'm like, I'm doing this read here about a product to dye your hair, and clearly I'm not using it.
By the way, it was funny when I went to give
the athlete says I'd be reading that live. The athlete should be looking at me like, wait, why are you reading this? Because I have to.
It's kind of like when you write a book about personal, professional, and physical, and then you let yourself get fat. You're like, I'm a walking example for that.
I am.
Well, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end this episode, and I'm going to go maybe give a speech somewhere. See you guys next time.
Thanks.